So today we're joined by Jessica Lee, Human Resource Operations and Program Manager at ZipRecruiter. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We are so thrilled to have you on today's episode, and we're going to be kind of going through just a few questions on kind of how you went about finding a new solution for your learning program. So to get us kicked off, let's sort of start basic. What were you doing internally to find a platform that fit your needs?
I would say the first thing we did was to look at our method of even getting new technology into the company. I know across the business, different teams have different approaches to adopting new tech. So in HR, there was a pause before we even began discovery of, research and reaching out to vendors. We wanted to map out what the entire process looks like for even vendor shopping. And so there was a lot of work done before our first calls or reach outs, which was really understanding what the business was looking for with this technology. There were some departments and teams who did not even know what a learning management system was, let alone what it could do. Right? So it was an education kind of roadshow that we did with all of our business unit leaders. We listed them out and set meetings. I partnered with an amazing colleague of mine, Anthony Markovich, in learning and development, and he and I really went on this blitz to say, hey, we want to look for this tool. What do you want out of it? How do you see it working for your team? And then we created a list and then a matrix to say, okay, this is everything that's important to the business. Now let's find the top vendors out there, in this space. And then as we have calls with them, it's a lot more pointed. We're not like, what do you do? We're saying, hey, do you have these features? So, to be a little to the point, do we need to even have 5 follow-up conversations if you don't have these key critical features that we know our business needs? Because I come into the space with my own preconceived what's important features, right? But It's not about me, it's about what our business needs, because we won't get that adoption that we're looking for if we're not providing those features to them. So it was a lot of pre-work, and then we jumped into our research and then reaching out to the vendors.
Yeah, there's always those sort of, baseline things that you're like, okay, I have to have this. It's kind of like when somebody looks for a new house, right? You have your must-haves and then you have your want-to-haves, and
Exactly.
you've got to check off the must-haves. If that's a walk-in closet, then you got to have that walk-in closet or whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Would you be able to share with us what some of the specific features that you were looking for, what made it onto your must-have list?
Right. I would say we prioritize them. So we had the list. I have it in front of me where it was integrations was huge. We came into a space where a lot of systems are not talking with each other. I think we all kind of suffer from that in different spaces across the business. So we were looking for the most open integrations we can possibly create. And then I inserted the learner engagement being really important as well. So is there the possibility for any kind of gamification, or is there a social learning platform available? Maybe it's not going to be a part of our V1 launch, but just making sure we're prepared for what we want to do in our phase 2 or phase 3 of the implementation. And then, this one popped up. I came into the space knowing that we would have good customer support, but a lot of the requests that we were fielding in was, what kind of customer support? Is it immediate? I mean, we're a tech company, so we, really value that and want to ensure that the support is there in case anything is really critical, because we onboard so many people, and we need things to work at a very timely pace. So those were our top 3. And then, things like compliance, we want to make sure we're all good with GDPR. And then also making sure that the clients that you guys have were of a similar field and you were used to our business size, so that, again, with that support, you can say, of course we have great support, but I mean, is it comparable to what we're looking for? So that was important as well.
Right. And so what were some of your initial business needs? So outside of the features of the platform itself, internally with the business, what were those needs going into this?
Our number one need was in having something that could scale with the business. These are different times right now, clearly, but we are looking ahead to wanting to make sure that we can again, have this prepared for us as we scale again in the future, right? So we're kind of seeing, it's like Groundhog Day a little bit.
Yeah.
We didn't have a learning management management system. So everything that we were doing with onboarding, we were onboarding, hundreds of people a year, was done with an instructor-led teaching format. So it was, human to human, like and we're growing not just, in our like 2 major offices, we're growing internationally. There are different time zones. How are we meeting everybody and giving them the same experience? How can we scale this if we're going to hire hundreds more? That was our number 1 need. And then number 2, we did an employee engagement survey, and we found that one of the major things our people wanted at ZipRecruiter was an opportunity for career development, for career growth, personal development, professional development. And sure, we can do one-offs and meet them where they are, but do we have, a library or a resource for the company that anyone can come to really democratize that space for them? So that was our second business need. So those were our 2 major that we wanted to meet with bringing this on.
That's fantastic. You mentioned there that you guys didn't actually have any kind of learning management system before. So how did you go about getting management buy-in for that? Because that's quite a big step, right?
Yeah, it was a really easy sell. We said, hey, how about we stop using Google Forms and Google spreadsheets for everything? And, yes, we can, filter and pivot tables and all that, to our heart's content, but this is going to automate so much of it. So the top 2 things I think that got some sparkly eyes were, 1, there is now a large level of transparency with being able to see what's happening, how many people are engaged, how many people are using this, what are people's scores on, very entry-level tests that we needed people to be able to pass, right, for certain parts of onboarding or training. And then the second piece was being able to provide managers and people leaders with learning analytics and reports on, hey, this is the effort that your team is putting in wanting to engage in their own growth. Or when you wanted to push out this new feature with our app, making sure that everyone knew about it enough to, sell it. So it was those 2 things that really got the buy-in. Everyone was super excited. We didn't have any opposition to it at all.
The amount of times that we hear that with people that have switched for the first time to a learning management system, they were using Google Docs. It's just like, it's such a different world once you get into the platform. So I'm so happy for you that was such a nice experience. But then in a similar kind of vein, sorry to jump in, Rob, but I'm just super interested in this story. How did you guys go about adoption then with the rest of the team? If they were so used to using the Google Docs, how did they then move into using quite a sophisticated system?
Yeah, I think it's important to gauge the culture of the organization when you're planning this out. Yeah. And we don't have a very top-down approach to much with the organization, so it's a lot more grassroots. So again, when we had those initial conversations with business unit leaders to say, how do you see this tool being useful to you and your team? We went and created kind of a personalized experience for each team to say, hey, what can we create for you to get that engagement? We don't want to have like an unlocking of the floodgates and say, okay, it's ready now. Everyone, come and get the experience that you want. We know that was going to be dicey and we probably wouldn't see the engagement we wanted. So we opted for, we would rather have people's first experience with the LMS be one that is meaningful to them and very purposeful. Otherwise, we're not going to engage with them at all just yet, because we want this to be a very organic as possible of an experience where they like the learning management system, can trust it, and feel like there's something of value to them there. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. It does. I'm sure there's so many elements, but that's great. It gives a good insight of how to do that with the personalization. It makes a lot of sense. A good way to ensure engagement.
In the same vein of that too, and I'm curious, especially as a business continuously scales, there's going to be a lot of different pieces of technology that are, across the different business units. So when you were looking for a new solution and as you were going through implementation, how important were integrations and what types of integrations were the most important to your team and then to the wider organization?
Yeah, I would say the first one, and our L&D team is in HR. So our first one was, the number of changes that happen with new hires and any, internal mobility changes, we cannot possibly imagine somebody, manually making those changes within the learning management system. And so it was crucial to us that the LMS have an integration with our HRIS. And so that was our primary, and we focused on that. And it has been a save for us all in terms of hours put in, right? So that was really crucial. And then the second piece was the Salesforce integration. We saved that for our phase 2, but we wanted to know that it was available just so that for our sales team, which is, a large part of our organization, we don't want to create any additional clicks or barriers to get into a learning experience if we can just house it right there on there as a tab in Salesforce. So that was the second one that was important to us.
Yeah. It makes sense. And so, on that sort of same idea too, how ideal or what was the sort of the ideal experience for both your administrators and then the learners within there, right? Because it's going to be a little bit different if you're a salesperson or if you're, right, each learner is going to have a different experience. And so what did you go about determining what would be the ideal experience for both the learners and for the administrators?
Yeah, that was an important question to us. So literally when we had those conversations with business unit leaders, we said, what do you want that experience to look like? What is important to them? And it varied. It went from like strict training to is there something that we can have for active listening, that is an option for people. And then some teams were like, no, I want my entire team to go through, a business writing class, or, it was all over the place. And it was actually a wonderful exercise in understanding what was happening across the business. So we were able to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone by even endeavoring on simply like an what do you want in an LMS exercise?
Yeah.
So it definitely varied. But as you can imagine, it went from like tactical all the way to, I want an option for these 3 classes for soft skills for my team.
Right.
So they can, browse through it. So it was, the spectrum was definitely there.
Yeah, we've had conversations on the podcast before just about trying to understand each learner, because each learner is so different. So it's like, how are you kind of providing? And it's the nice thing with digital technology. There's a certain level of flexibility where so long as you're doing that work up front and saying, okay, what type of learners do I have? You can make sure that you have the right technology in place to serve those different needs.
Exactly. And it's kind of fun to, we talk to our people leaders and they say, oh, my team wants this. And then we come back to them with the report and we said, only 40% of your team actually participated in this. Let's revisit this. What do you think we need to do differently? Is it a different, type of material? Is it a different type of experience? So it has definitely kept the conversation going. Yeah. So I think that's great because we imagine, career development isn't like, I ask you once and then we put it into the learning management system and then we walk away. This is a living, breathing tool that needs to continue to change with the business and be responsive to what people are looking for. And, I have a different interest in what I was, hoping to learn about 3 months ago than today. So we want to make sure that this place continues to be
I'm not
of
sure
use.
I understand.
Siri as well.
Siri is interested as well, yeah.
Amazing. So it sounds like you had quite a few different departments and teams to please with this purchase. So I wonder, did you have any specific like scoring system or some way to kind of like rank the different companies that you were speaking with?
We do.
Yeah. Oh, is it embarrassing?
My master spreadsheet that we created with our features and with the vendors, we chose the top 10. And then from there, we went through and created check boxes and we said, okay, from these 10, let's narrow it down to 5 we'll actually speak to based on the number of features they actually have that we can glean from the website at least, before we start having conversations. And then from the 5, we narrowed it down to 3. And then from 3, it came down to 2 vendors that had all of the same features. And then I think from there it was, what has our relationship been like thus far with our sales rep, and do we like this relationship, and do we like this style? And then it came down to also, of course, a budget, conversation as well. Yeah. But we were very strategic in even how we narrowed it down, and we kept our leadership abreast of where we were in each process. They didn't even ask for, this granular of a process, but if you don't have something like this of some sort, then you're just kind of out there choosing one and then dealing with whatever you end up getting. So we were very purposeful in our selection.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So throughout the whole thing, what did you find the most challenging? And like, do you have any advice for someone that maybe is going through the same thing right now?
Yes, I do actually. So, you know, this is, I don't know if you want to keep this in the podcast, but Docebo was not our first choice. We had a different vendor that we chose, and it came down to Docebo and this other vendor.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, we're going to go with this other vendor. And the last step we had was, let's ask the vendor to give us 3 clients that we can talk to see what their experience was, because we're getting the bright and shiny promises, right? And so we talked to these 3 clients from the other vendor, and they told us that, you know, one of them said, we're not renewing our contract. The other one said, we're leaving to go to Docebo. The other one said, you know, like, we're probably not going to use them again. And it was like, oh my gosh, we were at the end of our road to making our final decision. And then we're hearing directly from clients that they're not going to continue the relationship because of XYZ. All these things weren't working. You know, they promised this and it's not happening. So that's how we decided, like, okay, well, we can do as much research and get the, you know, marketing as much as we want, but we heard it straight from the client's mouth. We're going to go to Docebo. And so that's what made us pivot and move forward with you guys. So I mean, I highly recommend in any vendor selection process that, you know, vendors should be transparent in providing us some client, you know, testimonials. And so Docebo, you guys provided us with a handful as well. And we were able to contact them and, you know, completely different conversations, you know, like, we've had a 5-year contract and we're going to keep going, you know, this is how happy we are with this. And we asked, like, any, you know, things we should be aware of, or should we be wary, you know, and they, you know, they were honest with, you know, like, hey, maybe this could be updated, et cetera. And we brought those back up to our rep to say, hey, this is what we heard from your clients, like, what's happening here? And then to hear, oh, that's on our roadmap, or, you know, that's coming in our next feature release. I mean, that's really encouraging to hear. So we felt even more confident, and we brought it back to our leaders to say, hey, we're switching over to this vendor last minute because of what we heard from client testimonials. And they were like, oh my gosh, great. You know? And so here we are. We don't regret our decision whatsoever. And so we were right to make that move. And I'm just not sure how many other companies are doing that, reach out to the testimonials from other clients.
I think that's such great advice. I think, yeah, it's something you got to live with. You know, you're going to be in and out of this platform constantly, and, you know, you got to put, so much into something. You want to make sure that this is the right company for you in so many aspects. So yeah, you're right. How many people do actually reach out and speak to people and figure out how is the experience for you as a peer, kind of thing. So I think that's fantastic advice, and I'm glad that it worked out. I'm glad that people are happy with us. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation. It was really enlightening for us. So so glad to hear that you're happy with everything, and glad that you made the right decision.
Yes, thank you.
And yeah, thank you so much. Keep safe, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Bye.
Bye.
That's great. Thank you very much. For more information on what we've discussed today, including links to resources and downloadable assets, go to docebo.com/podcast. That's docebo.com/podcast. And subscribe to our newsletter.
You can also find us on iTunes, Spotify, and all other places where you get your podcasts by searching Learning Elevated. So don't forget to click subscribe so you know when we're disembarking on another floor.